Hello, everybody. I'm here with Dr. Justin Davies, someone who I got to meet a couple of years ago. He's in Imperial College in the United Kingdom and is an interventional cardiologist like myself, although he's a lot smarter than I am. But I asked him to come on with us because we all know in New York what's happening with our tremendous amount of patients that are infected with this. And I thought it would be an interesting view to see what's happening in Europe because they're a couple of weeks ahead of our curve here. So, Justin, thank you so much for taking the time out today. What's happening in Europe? Obviously, you're a couple of weeks ahead of us. What are you seeing there?
Well, I mean, I can share some opinions from our own experience locally, and also from what I've been hearing from loads of colleagues I'm talking to in Italy and Spain. I think that there was a whole period of expectation based on around the horrible scenes we've been seeing from Italy. So, there was a rapid increase in the number of cases, which really, I think, took people by surprise, how quickly they escalated. And I think a number of the services at the time were only just starting to gear up to how bad the crisis may be. The government started to react. And in that time period, a lot of people became infected, which led to a huge strain, as you know, on the services. We saw this coming 2-3 weeks later in the UK. Policies were made finally to slowly kind of close down the country, restrict movement, which I think has probably had a positive response in terms of the number of cases have been seen. There was a lot of preparation, huge amount of anxiety around this wave of cases, which were going to sweep our hospital systems. The hospital systems that I'm involved with in Imperial have 3 main hospitals, 2 of which acutely admit patients with ERs, and they're very, very busy in terms of with patients with a whole range of different complaints of COVID, and obviously the sickest of those going to the intensive care units. There is still a little capacity in the intensive care, but these have been massively expanded out from what is our normal capacity. The hospital, which is Hammersmith, where most of the intervention's done, is because there's no direct admission there, and because the ambulances are so busy taking people back and forth from home to hospital, has been a little bit less aggressively hit. But still, challenges are there really for the teams there, really in and around dealing with patients with acute coronary syndromes, primary PCI. Initially, the levels of primary PCI that we're seeing initially fell off. But over the last few days and over the Easter weekend, the numbers returned pretty much to what had been seen for our historical averages.
So
I think it is interesting. And talking to colleagues who covered over that weekend, I think it was very challenging. Trying to do cases with patients where you've got all the PPE equipment on. That's challenging in itself. Communicating is challenging in an environment where you can't easily communicate with people. Then if patients become very sick and don't make it through procedures, having come in very sick already, dealing with families is very difficult with relatives who don't make it through procedures, because the hospital systems are unkeen in having too many people in the hospital, and even seeing those relatives when they may themselves be exposed to COVID, and you have to wear the full PPE equipment is again a very, very challenging environment to work in, and one Richie, us as doctors, those moments are very, very difficult, and you need to use a lot of empathy and communicate with people effectively as you can, and you've got all these barriers which make this very, very difficult.
But we're experiencing the same thing. Justin, you brought something up, interesting what we're doing here in New York, at least. St. Francis, where we are, it's a primary cardiac hospital, and we do 95% of the work cardiac. But when this crisis developed, our governor basically said all elective procedures are done, and our hospital, which is around 320 beds, went to 85% COVID. So, I was trying to make us the cardiac center to handle all the cardiac stuff. Didn't work out, and we had to retrain our staff who were in the cath lab to work on the floors. And so, we there was challenges in the beginning getting the PPE, but I imagine you have all your people are staying safe with equipment. That's not a problem. What about social? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes, so the equipment, I think across the whole of the UK is problematic. We had some funds raised locally to enable us to go out into the open marketplace, global marketplace, and where there were shortfalls, to actually make sure that those gaps were filled quickly. So I think now there's adequate equipment in our hospital to make sure that people are safe.
What about non-medical? You're home, you're out with your wife, kids. Is everything shut down? In New York, to give you an idea, is you can go to a supermarket, a drugstore, and a gas station, and that's about it. Is it the same in Europe?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. You even doing those routine things, you can be stopped by the police. I was stopped by the police 3 times over the weekend in 25 minutes, which for someone who doesn't get stopped by the police ever in their life, but maybe a speeding ticket, is a unique experience. But I think that these factors of social distancing are probably the most critical ones, because I think that we simply by us limiting the distance from one another, you and I know that it's very hard for infections to spread. It's very hard with the general population who are less used to dealing with infection. They don't know how to, well, they're not even aware of the risks, and some of them, what they're doing in putting themselves at risk and others at risk, and continuing the infectious cycle by being in a busy underground train or a bus. So I think it's very necessary government's taking these steps, and just hope that people respect that distancing, so that infection rates can start to fall and life can return to normal as soon as possible.
So just touching on something a little different, you're involved in some very interesting educational projects.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if your company is working with this particular crisis to get that information out. Have you jumped all over that?
We have, and so we've done a number of communications from physicians right on the front line, literally outside the doors of the intensive care units in busy centres in Milan and Madrid and in Portugal and in London, and also
you can see, like if let's say a doctor in Alabama wanted to see some of this information, how do they access your sites and find out educational things?
Yeah, so that's very straightforward. So the site's called Rutherford Medicine, and if you click on there and you search for COVID-19, or one of the tabs there's COVID-19, have a look. There's a series of videos, a series of webinars. There's a webinar tomorrow done by some of the leading physicians in the world, talking about lung complications, how to image, what we should be looking for, and the likes of that. And that, that I think has been really helpful. And the whole concept here is to try and bring together communities from all around the world with different bits of expertise, bringing the Chinese guys in who obviously had early experience, then the guys from Italy, and now some physicians more locally who have been seeing a lot of these cases. But I think one thing is very apparent: the management of these patients in a critical environment is potentially different to how we'd conventionally manage people who had a conventional infection. And I can share a personal experience with you. Over 2 weeks ago, my medical school year group started a WhatsApp group, and within half an hour, 2/3 of the whole year were on this group. And it's quite amazing because a number of them are anesthetic doctors, respiratory doctors, critical care environment. One of them was involved with looking after a very important person in the UK recently. And very, very amazing to see the sharing of knowledge. Which is different from that we would use normally in these environments, or you and I would use in a cardiology environment. But I think one thing which has come from it is this huge collaborative spirit. Team members who maybe didn't used to get on are working in partnership. Hospitals which didn't get on are working in partnership.
Right.
It's fantastic to see.
And what was that site again? Just because this is something that's really quite useful. Well, how does somebody go on? You go onto the internet and you type in what?
So go to the internet and type in rutherfordmedicine.com, and that'll get you there, rutherfordmedicine.com.
Well, Justin, I know you're busy, and I don't want you getting stopped by the police anymore, so stay home. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you in Europe or the US. It's always great seeing you. And thank you so much for taking the time, right? Stay safe.
No worries. Thanks, Richie. Thank you.